You're not going to believe this, but I lost out on $1,700,000. Actual, real, bank-changing money. And here's the part that's going to sound crazy. That was the best thing that ever happened to me. Go ahead, think I lost my mind. Everybody who's heard this story so far thought the same thing, right up until I got to the end. So stick with me, because by the time I'm done, you're going to understand why I mean it. My name's Mark. I'm 41 years old, middle manager at a logistics company. The kind of job where you spend your whole day scheduling other people's trucks and nobody remembers your name at the Christmas party. I rent a 2-bedroom apartment on the north side of town. Nothing fancy. Carpets older than some of my coworkers. But I had a good life. A real one. Parents who still call me every Sunday. My mom always working some new girl into the conversation. Some coworker's daughter. Some girl from church. Anybody she thinks might finally get me married off. My sister Sarah lives 15 minutes away with her husband Dave. Good guy, the kind who shows up with his own tools when you're fixing a fence. And then there's Mia, my niece, 16 years old, runs a video channel with more followers than I'll ever have friends. And somehow she's the one explaining the internet to me instead of the other way around. That was my world. Small, steady, mine. Then I met Chloe. It was at a co-worker's engagement party. One of those backyard things with string lights and a rented margarita machine. I'd known who she was for years. The way you know a name in a town that's really just a big, small town, friends of friends, that kind of thing. From back when I was younger and had a lot less going for me. Even then I noticed her. Never said a word about it, because her family had money. Real money. The kind with a lake house and a name on a hospital wing. She's 10 years younger than me, and back in those days, she wouldn't have looked twice. But there she was, standing by the cooler, just broken up with some guy who owned half a car dealership. And for reasons I still don't fully understand, she looked at me like I was interesting. I should have asked myself why. I didn't. I asked her out instead. For the first few months, I was the happiest broke man in the state. Took her to restaurants I couldn't afford twice in 1 month. Bought her a bracelet on a payment plan I still had 6 weeks left on when it all fell apart. Some part of me, way in the back, kept whispering that I was just the guy she was parked with until someone better drove by. I shut that voice up every time it opened its mouth. Told myself I was being paranoid. Told myself she was different. The first real crack showed up at Sunday dinner. My mom does a big family meal every week. No excuses. I brought Chloe. She sat at that table in boots that probably cost more than my car payment and looked at my mom's pot roast like somebody had served her a shoe. Polite on the surface, cold underneath. Mia caught it before anybody else did. 16 years old. And she's got a radar for fake people that I never developed in 41 years of living. Pulled me into the kitchen later and said, flat out, Uncle Mark, she doesn't sit right with me. Sarah backed her up, in that careful way sisters do when they don't want to start a fight, but need you to hear them anyway. Chloe never once brought her own family into the picture. Never introduced me to her parents. Not one single time, the whole way through. I told myself she was private. Looking back now, I know the truth. She was ashamed of me, ashamed of the apartment, the rent, the job title that never came with a corner office. Then came the trip to her aunt's place. Chloe had an Aunt Beatrice, older, not well, living alone about 50 miles outside the city in an old stone house that looked like it belonged on a postcard. Chloe told me her parents were pushing her to go check in, keep the relationship warm, because Beatrice didn't have kids of her own, and Chloe was set to inherit whatever was left when she passed. She asked me to ride along. I figured it was a nice thing, spending time with family. Didn't know yet how cold the real reason was. Beatrice turned out to be one of the kindest people I ever met. Her husband had passed a few years back. He was Chinese, came over decades ago, built a whole life with her in that house, and the house showed it. Carved dragons on the mantel, silk paintings down the hallway, a whole shelf of jade figures that Beatrice dusted by hand, every single one, because he used to do it, and now it was her turn. There was a chair in the corner of the sitting room, old wood, dark, with a curved back shaped almost like a horseshoe. Beatrice sat in it the whole visit. Said it used to be her husband's favorite spot in the house. I noticed it, The way you notice something out of place in a room full of ordinary furniture. And then I moved on. Didn't think twice about it. Not yet. What really got me was the bird. Beatrice kept a cockatoo in a big brass cage by the window, a gift from her husband right before he passed. And that bird talked. Not gibberish, not random squawking, actual words in Mandarin, spoken in a voice Beatrice had belonged to her husband. For phrases. Hello. Thank you. You're beautiful. I love you. Over and over, all afternoon, in that same rough, warm voice. She told me cockatoos can live 50, 60 years if they're cared for right, and they bond to one person or one home so hard that some of them never fully recover if they're separated from it. Hers had picked up those 4 phrases from hearing her husband say them every single day for 15 years straight, and it never dropped a single one of them. Hearing that bird talk, she said, was the closest thing she had left to hearing her husband's voice. I'm not ashamed to say that got me a little choked up. I ended up spending most of that visit with Beatrice instead of Chloe. She showed me photos of the Great Wall, told me stories about her husband's home village, taught me how to say hello and thank you the right way. Not the bird's rough version, but the real pronunciation. I even fixed a little wind-up music box for her, some cheap thing with a busted spring, because it used to be his favorite, and it drove her crazy sitting there silent. Always wanted to see China someday myself. That afternoon planted the seed a lot deeper than I realized at the time. Chloe sat on the couch the whole visit, on her phone, barely looking up. On the ride home, she told me the whole thing made her sick. Not the house, not the loss, just the entire idea of an old woman and her dead husband's junk. We argued the whole 50 miles back. A few weeks after our second visit, Beatrice passed. Chloe's reaction told me everything I needed to know, even though I was too deep in it to admit it yet. No tears, no real grief, just relief that the estate was hers now and plans, already forming out loud before the day was even over, about ripping out all the old furniture and doing the place over top to bottom in some cold modern style. Beatrice hadn't left her a fortune. No hidden bank accounts, no stocks. Just the house and the land under it. Chloe was already talking about it, like she'd hit the jackpot herself. The day before the lottery drawing, we stopped for gas. My hands were full, coffee in one, a bag of chips in the other. So I handed Chloe some cash and asked her to run in and grab me a ticket. Same numbers I always played. Mia's birthday, my mom's birthday, my dad's birthday. Numbers I've been playing for years, out of habit more than hope. Chloe laughed at me the whole time I recited them off. Only suckers hope for the lottery. She said, you'd be better off picking up an extra shift than throwing cash at a dream. I let it roll off me. I'd heard worse from her by then. She came back out with the ticket a minute later. I know playing birthdays isn't smart. Statistically, since half the country plays the same 1 through 31 numbers, and you end up splitting a jackpot a dozen ways if you're ever lucky enough to hit it. But those numbers were never about the odds for me. They were the people I loved. That was the whole point of them. We got home, and I set the ticket down on the little table by the lamp, right next to my keys, planning to sign the back before bed like I always did. Every ticket, every time, soon as I bought it. My dad drilled that into me as a kid, back when he used to play the numbers himself. Sign it right away, he'd say, because an unsigned ticket doesn't belong to anybody in particular. It belongs to whoever's holding it. Chloe started right in on me the second we walked through the door. Some complaint about her mother, some story I was only half listening to, because I was tired and just wanted to sit down. I sat down and let it go. Never picked that ticket back up off the table. Went to bed that night without a single signature on the back of it. Didn't think about it again for 3 days. Had no idea what that one small mistake was about to cost me, or what it was about to save me from. 3 days went by, easy as anything. Work, traffic, takeout on the couch. The ticket sat there on the table by the lamp the whole time, not once crossing my mind. Then day 3 ended, and Chloe wasn't home to meet me. She should have been. She had a key. We'd fallen into a rhythm by then. Her letting herself in most evenings, usually already parked on the couch with the television going by the time I walked through the door, complaining about her day before I even got my shoes off. Not that night. Apartment dark. quiet in a way that felt wrong the second I stepped inside. I figured maybe traffic. Maybe she stopped at the store, went to the bathroom to wash up, and that's when I noticed her toothbrush wasn't in the cup by the sink. Just mine, standing there alone. Told myself I was imagining things. Walked to the closet, and her side was empty. Hanger still there, swinging a little, like they'd just been cleared out in a hurry. That little stack of paperback romance novels she kept on my nightstand. Gone too. Even the charger she left plugged in by the bed, like she'd never set foot in the place. I called her. First time, straight to voicemail. Second time, same thing. Third time. She finally picked up, and her voice on the other end was colder than anything I'd ever heard out of her. "It's over between us, Mark," she said, flat and final. "I'm done being tied to a guy with nothing going for him." Then she hung up before I could get a word in. I sat on the edge of my bed for I don't know how long, phone still in my hand, running through every single thing I might have done wrong. Try to figure out what I said, what I forgot, what I could have done different. Never once crossed my mind that the timing had anything to do with her just becoming the sole owner of a paid-off house on 15 acres. Then my eyes landed on the little table by the lamp. The ticket was gone. My stomach dropped straight through the floor. Told myself I just moved it somewhere and forgot. Even though I knew for a fact I hadn't touched it since the night, I set it down. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the numbers from a drawing a couple of days earlier, one I'd honestly forgotten all about. Mia's birthday. My mom's. My dad's. Every single one of them. Right there on the screen, matching the numbers I'd been playing for years out of habit more than hope. $1,700,000. I stood there in my kitchen reading those 6 digits over and over, laughing one second, half sick to my stomach the next. Already picturing paying off the truck, helping my folks with the roof they kept putting off, maybe finally telling my boss where he could stick his Monday status meetings. Then it hit me all over again. The ticket was gone. Chloe was gone. And those two facts landed in my head about 3 seconds apart from each other. I must have called her 15 times before she picked up. When she finally did, she sounded almost bored, like she had somewhere better to be. Asked her point blank about the ticket. Kept my voice as level as I could manage, even though my hands were shaking so bad. I nearly dropped the phone. "What ticket?" she asked, cool as anything. "I bought it myself with my own cash," she said, "and it's all right there on the gas station cameras if you want to go check." Then she said the part that really finished me off. "It's signed, Mark, with my name, not yours." I hung up and sat there in the dark a long time, trying to work out how somebody could do that to another person and sound so calm saying it. The next morning I found a lawyer. Sat in a waiting room with fish tank sounds playing from a speaker somewhere. Paid $300 I really couldn't spare just to sit across a desk from a guy in a decent suit who told me, gently as he could manage, that I didn't have a case. I pushed back on him a little. Told him I dictated those numbers myself, that they were my family's birthdays, that had to count for something in a court of law. He asked if I had any of that in writing anywhere, a text, an email, anything with a timestamp on it. I didn't. It all happened out loud, standing at a gas pump. Asked him about filing a police report too, calling it stolen property. He said that wouldn't get me anywhere either. Not when the security footage backed her story start to finish, and there wasn't one single scratch of paper proving different. He just shook his head. Told me courts don't rule on what numbers mean to a person. They rule on paper and footage. The gas station cameras had her paying cash. Her signature was on the back, and once a lottery ticket gets signed, most states treat that signature as the final word on who owns it, no matter who technically paid for it or whose idea the numbers were in the first place. An unsigned ticket belongs to whoever's holding it. A signed one belongs to whoever signed it. Simple as that, he told me, tapping his pen on the folder. You could fight it, he said, but you'd just be paying me to lose slower. Fighting it would just drain what little I had left on legal fees for a fight I couldn't win. That was the day it really hit me what I'd actually been to her the whole time. Not a boyfriend, a placeholder, a stand-in to fill the gap after her last rich boyfriend, and before whatever came next. And I happened to be standing there with a truck and a decent job and enough patience to put up with her while she figured her life back out. My family tried their best to pull me out of it. Mom kept showing up with casseroles I didn't have much appetite for, leaving them in the fridge whether I ate or not. Dad didn't say a whole lot, never really has. But he sat me down one evening and said, "Money that comes easy usually leaves easy too, son. The kind that stays is the kind you sweat for." Wasn't much comfort right then, but I've thought about it plenty of times since. Dave came by one night with a case of beer and just sat with me on the porch, not saying much of anything. That helped more than any of the advice everybody else kept trying to hand me. Mia texted me a meme about karma so unfunny it somehow made me laugh anyway. First time I'd laughed in about a week. A little while later, Beatrice's funeral finally got scheduled. I went, told myself it was because I respected the woman, and that part was true. But if I'm honest, I also wanted one more look at Chloe up close before I let this whole thing go for good. Funeral homes smelled like lilies and carpet cleaner. That specific combination you only ever run into in places like that. Her parents were there, dressed like they were headed to a business luncheon instead of burial, shaking hands and checking their phones between hugs. Standing right next to Chloe, hand resting on the small of her back like he'd never left, was that same rich ex-boyfriend she'd supposedly been so broken up over back when I met her. She saw me. I know she did, because our eyes met for about half a second across that room, and then she turned her whole body away on purpose, like I was a stain on the sidewalk she didn't want on her shoe. I didn't go up to her, didn't cause a scene, just paid my respects to a woman who'd shown me more warmth in 2 afternoons than Chloe managed in 8 months, signed a little book by the door, and drove home with the radio off the whole way. 5 days after that, I needed my spare keys back bad, had a one-day work trip out of state coming up, and Mia had agreed to swing by and water my plants while I was gone. Changing the locks crossed my mind more than once, but I rent that apartment, and getting the landlord to sign off on a locksmith before my flight the next morning wasn't happening. That would have to wait till I got back. For now, I just needed the actual keys, and my spare set was still sitting somewhere in Chloe's purse. I called her, half expecting her to ignore it. This time she picked up. "The keys are with me," she said. "I'm over at Beatrice's place right now waiting on a furniture delivery. If you want them, come get them yourself," she said. "I can't leave." I found that a little strange. The estate hadn't even finished going through probate yet, not officially. But I guess once you're named the only heir, nobody's stopping you from picking out couches early. Mia asked to ride along, said she was bored out of her mind and wanted company, and I didn't have it in me to argue with a 16-year-old about much of anything that week. So we loaded up in my truck and headed out toward that same 50-mile stretch of road that led to the big stone house, Mia running through some TikTok drama the whole way like nothing in the world was wrong, which I needed more than I let on. Neither one of us had any idea what we were about to find when we got there. The place came into view right as the sun started to dip, and even from the end of the driveway I could see it. Trucks parked out front. A dumpster off to the side of the yard, already halfway full. The whole house lit up and crawling with people in work clothes. Hammers going. Somebody's radio playing out an open window. Full-blown renovation. Already tearing the place apart. The place looked worse up close than it had from the end of the driveway. Mia and I walked through what used to be Beatrice's front hall, and I barely recognized it. Fresh drywall dust everywhere. That chalky smell that gets in the back of your throat. Workers running cable through holes they'd punched in the old plaster. The staircase Beatrice used come down slow, one hand on the rail, now stripped bare down to raw wood, waiting on some gray modern finish I already knew I'd hate. Even the dragons on the mantel were gone. Not packed up somewhere, just gone, like they'd never been part of the house at all. Mia didn't say much, just walked next to me with her hands jammed in her jacket pockets, looking around like she was at a funeral for a second time. Chloe met us in what used to be the sitting room, holding a paint swatch fan like it was the most important thing in the world. She handed over my spare keys without much ceremony, dropped them straight into my palm, already half turned back toward the contractor waiting behind her. I didn't have it in me to say much to her. Didn't trust myself to open my mouth without anything ugly coming out. So I just took the keys and turned to leave, Mia trailing behind me. I was halfway to the truck, cutting past the dumpster on the side of the yard, when I heard it. Hello, not a person. That same rough, warm Mandarin voice from Beatrice's sitting room. The one that used to make the hair on my arm stand up, I stopped dead in the driveway. I circled behind the dumpster, and there it was, Beatrice's chair, the one with the horseshoe-shaped back, shoved up against the side of the bin like a piece of trash nobody wanted to look at. On top of it, the brass cage, the bird inside it, blinking at me in the last of the daylight. I called Chloe's name loud enough that a couple of the workers turned to look. She came around the corner, already talking, and once she got going, she didn't stop. That's junk from a senile old woman, she said, practically shouting across the yard. I can afford anything new now. The neighbor kids were supposed to come get that bird days ago and never showed. You're so sentimental about it. She said, fine, take the garbage and the bird both, or I'm calling the shelter and letting them deal with it. I can afford anything new. She said it like it was nothing, like the words didn't cost her anything at all, and I stood there knowing exactly which $1 million she meant. I told her I finally saw her clear. No respect for people, no respect for animals, no respect for a woman who'd been nothing but kind to her right up until the day she died. She rolled her eyes and walked back toward her contractor before I even finished the sentence. Mia hopped down from the truck without me asking. Between the two of us, we wrestled that chair into the truck bed, heavier than it had any right to be for its size. All dense old wood and joints that didn't budge an inch. The cage went on the bench seat between us. Mia already cooing at the bird through the bars like she'd found a lost puppy. I'm keeping him, she said, already checking the latch on the cage door twice. Don't even try to talk me out of it, Uncle Mark. I wasn't about to. Back at my place, I set the chair against the kitchen wall, out of the way, but somewhere I'd see it every morning. Felt like the least I could do for a woman who'd shown me more warmth in 2 afternoons than most people manage in a lifetime. The bird I named Captain. Spent the first few weeks trying to teach him a couple words of English, standing in front of that cage like an idiot repeating good morning over and over. He wasn't interested. What I got instead, on a loop, at whatever hour he felt like it, was the exact same phrases in Mandarin. Hello. Thank you. You're beautiful. I love you. Beatrice's husband's voice, still going strong years after the man himself was gone. Having that voice in the apartment again, even secondhand, even from a bird, took some of the edge off those first few months. I won't pretend it didn't help. A few months went by like that, work and Captain, and a chair I dusted more than I probably needed to. Then one Tuesday I was cutting down the hallway at the office with 2 coffees. Late for a call, moving faster than I should have been, and I plowed straight into a group of people coming the other way. Both cups, down the front of a woman, who could not have looked less prepared for it. I went into full apology mode, grabbing napkins off a nearby desk, half convinced I was about to get fired on the spot. A co-worker grabbed my arm on the way past and hissed at me, low and panicked, that the man standing behind her was Mr. Lin, the single biggest shareholder the company had, and the woman currently wearing my coffee was his only daughter. I said a quiet goodbye to my job right there in the hallway. Turned out being the biggest shareholder isn't the same as running the place day to day. He doesn't sign paychecks or sit in on meetings. He just owns enough of the company that if he's unhappy, the people who do sit in on meetings get very unhappy right behind him. I learned that from a terrified HR rep about 10 minutes later, and it didn't do a single thing to calm me down. She also shoved a couple of business cards into my hand on her way past, hissing at me to use both hands if it came to giving him mine, and for the love of God not to shove it straight in my pocket without looking at it first. I filed away like my life depended on it, because at that particular moment I was fairly sure it did. Nobody fired me. Mr. Lin barely looked my way. His daughter, coffee still soaking into her blouse, just studied me for a second like she was deciding whether to say anything else, then walked off with her father without a word. Next evening I saw her again, waiting by the front entrance for him to finish up inside. I don't know what got into me. Maybe I figured I owed her more than a hallway full of napkins. I walked over before I could talk myself out of it, blanked completely on the proper pronunciation Beatrice had spent an afternoon teaching me, and blurted out the only thing that came to mind instead, the same lines Captain says every morning of his life. Hello, you're beautiful. She laughed, for real, not polite laughing. Turned out I'm the guy you had to go change your whole outfit for yesterday. She said, in English so clean, I understood every word twice as fast as I expected to. Went to school in the States. She told me, Chicago, for years. I introduced myself properly, apologized again, and this time she waved it off before I even finished. To make it up to her, I took her to the little bakery 2 blocks from the office, the one with the burnt sugar smell that hits you before you're even through the door. We sat there for 2 hours over coffee and pastries. No idea where the time went. Her name was May. Her father was easing her into the company, slow, one department at a time, and she talked about it like it was a weight more than an honor. Told me she'd rather have gone into architecture, back when anybody still asked her what she wanted. I told her about Beatrice, about a Great Wall trip I'd been dreaming about since I was a kid, who'd never left the state. She corrected my pronunciation on half the Mandarin words I tried out on her, laughing every single time, never once making me feel stupid for trying. Hadn't felt that calm sitting across from another person in longer than I wanted to admit. We spent the better part of a week like that. Museums after work, a walk along the river one night that ran 2 hours longer than either of us planned, standing at the railing until the last of the tour boats had cleared out for the night. I fell for her fast, faster than I had any business falling for anybody again, and I didn't care. She flew home with her father, promised she'd be back in 2 weeks for the next round of meetings. I went home that night feeling lighter than I had in a long time, and made the mistake of telling my family everything over dinner, going on way too long about the river walk while Mom kept refilling my plate like extra mashed potatoes might slow me down. Sarah didn't share my mood. Mark, she said, setting her fork down. She's a rich man's daughter. Marriages and families like that happen for business, not love. She's probably already got somebody picked out to match her family status, whether she likes it or not. Mia backed her up, more subdued than usual, just nodding along instead of cracking a joke for once. I sat there with my fork halfway to my mouth, that warm feeling from a week before going cold in my chest. Maybe I'd done it again, believed in something too good to be real, right before it found a way to break me all over again. 2 weeks felt longer than the 2 months before it. We video called almost every night, her voice coming through tinny and small on my phone screen, some hotel lamp glowing behind her in a room bigger than my whole apartment. I spent most of my free time hunched over a language app at my kitchen table, trying to get ahead of a bird that had a 15-year head start on me. Turns out Mandarin isn't just new words. It's 4 different tones stacked on the same syllable. And get the tone wrong, and you said a completely different word without knowing it. Spent one whole evening accidentally telling the app one wanted to buy a horse instead of asking how someone was doing. May laughed for a solid 5 minutes when I told her about it. Wasn't much of a race, tone or no tone. I lost every night and kept showing up anyway. One call, I asked her straight out if there was anyone back home. Somebody her family already liked, somebody her age, somebody who made sense on paper. She went quiet, looked off to the side of the screen instead of at me, the way people do right before they decide whether to tell you the truth or just enough of it to get by. It's complicated, she said finally and left it there. I didn't push. Some part of me already knew I wasn't going to like the answer, so I let it drop and asked about her flight instead. 2 weeks to the day, she landed with her father. Mr. Lin turned out just like I'd pictured him from that one frozen half second in the hallway. Gray suit, not a wrinkle on it. The kind of stillness that swallows the noise right out of a room just by walking into it. He shook my hand, then held out a card between 2 fingers, and I remember what the HR woman had drilled into me weeks earlier, took it with both hands. Actually looked at it for a second before it went in my pocket. His expression shifted, just barely. Thanked me, in careful English, for keeping his daughter company while he'd been buried in meetings. Said it the way you'd thank a tour guide, not a boyfriend, not anything close to it. We weren't about to announce ourselves after that, so we met the way people meet when they're not supposed to. Her hotel, mostly. Some room on the 40th floor with a view that made my chest hurt a little every time I walked in. Room service menus with prices. I did the math on out of habit and immediately regretted. I never once suggested she come to my place. 2 bedrooms, second-hand couch. A chair I'd rescued off a dumpster sitting in the kitchen, like a museum piece nobody paid to see. Wasn't ready to have her walk into that yet. She teased me about it once. Said she'd never dated a man who got nervous about a zip code before. I told her I wasn't nervous about the zip code. I was nervous about the couch. She laughed harder at that than the joke deserved, which I decided to take as a good sign. I told her everything, one night in that hotel room. The two of us sitting cross-legged on a bed the size of my entire bedroom back home. Chloe, the ticket, the lawyer who cost me $300 just to tell me I had nothing. Told her what it felt like being somebody's placeholder for 8 months and not knowing it, the specific kind of stupid that comes from finding out last. She listened without saying much, and when I finished she told me she loved me. Said it plain, no build-up, like she'd been carrying it around for days looking for the right moment to set it down. Then she told me the rest. Her father had already arranged things, she said. A marriage to the son of one of his business partners. 2 companies folding into one, tidier on paper than any handshake deal could manage. Told me it happened more than people back home probably realized. Families like hers treating marriage less like romance and more like a merger with better catering. The kind of arrangement that's kept fortunes intact for generations longer than any stock portfolio could manage on its own. She'd known about hers for over a year and never said yes, never said no. Just let it sit there unanswered because saying no out loud felt like a door she wasn't allowed to close yet. I'll talk to him, she said. Promise me you'll give me that. I promised. Right there in that hotel room with the city lights, doing nothing to make either of us feel any bigger than we were. Didn't know yet how much that promise was going to cost either one of us. A couple days before she was set to fly home, she showed up at my apartment for the first time. I opened the door, already knowing something was wrong. Her eyes were red, makeup gone from crying it off somewhere in the elevator ride up. She stood in my hallway for a second before she even came inside, like she was memorizing the place. The chip paint on the door frame, the welcome mat that wasn't mine when I moved in and never got replaced. She told me she'd talked to her father. Told me he'd said no, flat out, no negotiation. To him, I wasn't a person he disliked, just a math problem that didn't balance. A guy with a rented apartment and a mid-level job couldn't give her the life she'd grown up inside of, and no amount of trying would change that equation, no matter how much either of us wanted it to. We were still standing in my living room when her phone rang, sharp and sudden in a room that had gone quiet the second she stopped talking. She looked at the screen and went pale before she even answered it. I watched her face while she listened, watched it drain out completely, and I didn't need to speak a word of Mandarin to know exactly how bad this was. He knew the address, pulled it straight from my own employee file at the company, the same company that still cut my paycheck every 2 weeks. He was already in the building, she said, voice shaking, already in the elevator, and there was nothing either of us could do but wait for the doors to open on my floor. 3 sharp knocks, no waiting between them. I opened the door, and there he was, filling up the whole frame of it, that same gray suit stillness gone hard around the edges. No card between his fingers this time. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. Just looked past me at his daughter and told her, in a tone that left no room in it for discussion, to get her things. I stepped in front of him before I even decided to. Told him I knew I couldn't compete with whatever he had planned for her. Told him I didn't have the house, the connections, any of it, and I wasn't going to stand here and pretend otherwise. But I loved her, and I was willing to learn the language properly. Work harder than I'd ever worked at anything, whatever it took to earn a place in her life, instead of being handed one. You are not our circle, he said, each word landing flat and final. You don't know our culture. You have nothing to give her. I didn't back down from that either. Told him money wasn't the only thing a person had to offer somebody, and that if he genuinely believed it was, he didn't know his own daughter half as well as he thought he did. It didn't land. His face didn't move an inch, like I'd been talking to the wall behind him instead of the man himself. May stood behind him crying without a sound, the kind of crying that comes from somebody who already knows how this ends and is just waiting for everyone else to catch up. Nobody said anything for a long moment after that. Just the 3 of us standing in my living room, the silence stretching out until it felt like its own kind of weight. Then, from the kitchen, a voice. Hello, cracked and hoarse. The same voice I'd heard in Beatrice's sitting room the very first time I ever set foot in that house. You're beautiful. I love you. Mr. Lin went rigid. He turned toward the kitchen slow, like his body was moving before the rest of them agreed to it. I watched him walk past me without a word, past the bird still cycling through Beatrice's husband's four phrases on a loop in the brass cage. His eyes dropped lower. The single biggest shareholder in the company I worked for, a man who hadn't so much as blinked while telling me I was worth nothing to his daughter, went down onto his knees on my kitchen floor, right there in front of May and me, and a bird that had no idea what it had just done, not looking at the bird at all, staring straight at the chair. Lin's voice, when he finally found it, came out cracked and small. "Where did this come from?" he asked, still on his knees, one hand hovering over it like he was afraid to touch it. I told him the whole thing. Beatrice, the husband who'd passed years before I ever met her. The chair sitting in her sitting room like just another piece of furniture until the day her niece decided it belonged in a dumpster. May stood frozen by the door the entire time, watching her father like she'd never once seen him on his knees for anything in her life. He was on the phone before I finished my sentence, talking fast in Mandarin to somebody he called an old friend, an antiques dealer who happened to be in the city that same week. He sent a specialized courier crew to my apartment that same afternoon. 2 guys in white gloves who packed the chair into a padded crate like it was made of eggshells. By the next morning, Lin had pulled me out of a meeting personally, walked straight past my director like the man wasn't even standing there, and driven me across town to the dealer's warehouse. The chair already waiting there under the same white sheets covering everything else in place. Cedar and old varnish stick in the air. The dealer put on a pair of white cotton gloves before he'd even shake my hand. Spent 20 minutes going over that chair with a loop pressed to one eye, running his fingers along joints I'd never once looked at closely in all those months of walking past it every morning on my way to the coffee maker. Nobody said a word through any of it. Lin stood there with his hands clasped behind his back like a man in church. "This is a jiaoyi," he told me, once he finally looked up. "A folding horseshoe-back armchair. Ming dynasty," he said, 14th to 17th century. And the way he said it made the number land different than it would have out of anybody else's mouth. He explained the rest, standing right there in his warehouse, more excited than any man in his 60s had a right to be over a piece of furniture. The entire frame folds flat, built that way so officials and military commanders could carry their own rank with them on campaign. X-shaped legs crossing at the center. No nails anywhere in it. Every joint cut and fitted by hand centuries before anybody invented glue that would have held up this long anyway. Told me there's an old saying, still used today, DEBA jiaoyi. The first chair, meaning whoever sits in it, is the one running the room. Fewer than 30 of these have survived in any condition we're talking about, most of them lost or burned or broken down for firewood by people who had no idea what they were looking at. People like Chloe, is what he didn't say out loud, but I heard it anyway. I signed off on shipping it to China under armed transport for a final round of authentication. 2 weeks of video calls later, the lab work came back clean. Every test they ran said the same thing. Real wood, real age, real history. I flew to Hong Kong for the auction myself, alone in a business class seat that felt bigger than my old bedroom, running numbers in my head the entire flight that I still couldn't quite make land right. Sat in a room full of people who could have bought my entire apartment building without checking their bank balance first. Paddles going up so casually it looked like they were swatting flies instead of spending fortunes. Watched the bidding climb past numbers I couldn't fully process in real time. My own heartbeat louder in my ears than the auctioneer's voice. It closed at $15,900,000. A few weeks later, after all the auction house fees, taxes, and paperwork had finally been taken care of, May and I met with Lin while he was back in the States on business. I told him I wanted to give him 10% of what I'd made from the sale. More, if he thought that was fair. He wouldn't take a cent, said what I'd done mattered more than money, that I'd saved a piece of his country's history from a landfill without knowing what it was worth, and that a man who did that out of respect rather than greed had earned his blessing with May the honest way. Not bought, earned. May didn't even let him finish before she threw her arms around him. She hugged him so hard, I honestly thought she might squeeze the air right out of him. Lin just laughed and hugged his daughter back, and for the first time since I'd met the man, there wasn't a trace of suspicion in the way he looked at me. 100,000 of it went straight into Mia's college fund, with strict instructions to study whatever she really wanted instead of whatever paid best, and some more went toward helping my parents and Sarah out where I could. She cried harder over that than she had over the video thing, which told me everything about what kind of kid she really was underneath the TikTok drafts. Paid a mechanic to finally deal with whatever had been triggering that check engine light for the better part of a year. Kept the truck itself, though. New tires, quiet engine, same worn-in driver's seat I'd broken in myself over 6 years of payments. I figured that was the end of it. A few weeks later, I found out different, through a co-worker who'd heard it from somebody at Dave's company. Turns out Dave had a couple beers too many at a corporate mixer and told the entire table about his brother-in-law's chair, the auction, the number with all those zeros on it. Word travels fast when it comes with $sign attached, and eventually it found its way back to Chloe. She called me boiling over. No hello. Straight into it. You stole my chair, she said, voice climbing higher with every word. I'm suing you for everything. Give it all back. Keep 10% if you want, or I swear I'll destroy you. I called my lawyer in a full panic. Same guy from the ticket mess. Still tapping that same pen against a folder like he'd never put it down since that first meeting. He didn't sugarcoat it. Word against word, he said. She's a legal heir of that estate, and unless you've got more than just your own memory of that day, we could lose this, and they'll freeze your accounts while it plays out. More than $10 million. Frozen and fought over in a courtroom for years. I hung up feeling like I'd never really gotten to keep any of it in the first place. I told my family everything that night, sick to my stomach all over again, staring at my plate instead of eating any of it. Mia slapped her own forehead, so hard I heard it from across the table. Uncle, did you seriously forget I'm a blogger? She said, already pulling her phone out of her back pocket. Told me she'd filmed all of it from the truck that day, meant to show her mom what kind of person Chloe really was, and just never got around to sending it before life moved on to the next disaster. Been sitting in her camera roll for months, buried under 100 TikTok drafts. The video was perfect. Every word came through clear as day. Her voice picked up through the truck's rolled-down window, without a trace of static. Take that disgusting chair, and the bird too. Chloe's voice said to the phone speaker, unmistakably hers. The chair is yours. I don't want it anymore. Get it out of here today, or I'll have someone haul it to the dump. My mom cried a little. My dad just shook his head slow, the way he does when he's decided somebody's finally gotten what's coming to them. We met with Chloe and her lawyer 2 days later in a conference room with a view I couldn't afford to notice. She came in loud, already threatening numbers before anybody sat down, that same confident sneer she used to wear across my kitchen table back when I was still nobody worth introducing to her parents. My lawyer didn't say a word, just set his phone on the table and hit play. Her own lawyer went white about 10 seconds and leaned over and whispered in her ear, and her expression changed completely, right there in front of everybody. You stole my lottery ticket. I told her once the room went quiet again, but I'm grateful for it. Because of you, I found real love and a whole lot more money than that ticket was ever going to pay out. She didn't say anything back, just grabbed her bag and walked out with her face twisted up like she'd bitten into something rotten. May and I bought a bigger place a few months after that, one with enough room for Captain to fly free through most of it instead of pacing his cage. He still says the same 4 phrases on his own schedule, and May's picked up doing the 4th one back to him in Mandarin every single time, like it's just become a thing our household does now. I flew out to meet her mother not long after, finally stood at the base of the Great Wall, like I'd been promising myself since I was a kid who'd never left the state. We got engaged up there, which felt like exactly the right place for it. Work made me a branch manager. I still show up most mornings same as always, still drive that same beat-up truck, still argue with May over whether the thermostat needs to be 68 or 70. They say everything that doesn't happen is a blessing in disguise. I know now that sometimes the biggest loss you'll ever take is just a ticket to the life you were actually supposed to have.